Okay, let's dive into this one. Abrosaurus. You hear that name, and maybe you picture something, I don't know, huge and tough.
Yeah, it sounds quite robust, doesn't it?
But get this, the name actually means delicate lizard. Delicate. For a sauropod? That seems, well, contradictory.
It absolutely does. And that contrast is really interesting right from the start. Sauropods, we think massive, heavy-boned.
Exactly. So what was delicate? That's the hook for you today.
It really makes you question what specific feature earned it that name. Was it the bones, its size, something else?
Precisely. And that's what we're digging into based on the sources you shared. We want to pull out the key stuff for you, where it lived, that whole naming situation, how big it really was compared to others, and where it sits on the dinosaur family tree.
The goal is clarity, right? Understand this specific dinosaur without getting totally lost in the jargon.
Yeah, making sense of this delicate lizard.
And, even if Abrosaurus isn't a household name like T-Rex or Stegosaurus, understanding it adds another piece to that huge Jurassic puzzle.
Right. Every find tells us a bit more about that ancient world.
Each one had its niche, its role in the ecosystem, Abrosaurus included.
So where did this story start? Where did Abrosaurus first, come to light?
Okay, so the discovery goes back to 1984, and the location is really important, the Tishanpu Quarry.
Oh, in China, right? Sichuan province.
That's the one. It's an incredibly famous site. Just tons of amazing dinosaur fossils have come out of there. A real hot spot.
So Abrosaurus was found in good company, so to speak.
Definitely. And the rocks there, the sediments the fossils were in, they date back to the Middle Jurassic period.
Middle Jurassic. What about how long ago are we talking?
Roughly, we're looking at the Bathonian to Colovian stages. So maybe 168 to 161 million years ago, give or take.
Wow. 160-something million years ago. It's kind of mind-boggling.
It really is. To picture that landscape, what's now a quarry, teeming with these creatures.
Okay, so Middle Jurassic China. We know it's a sauropod, but what did it look like? What made it stand out besides the name?
Right. So it belongs to the Macronaria group of sauropods. And basically all sauropods. It was a four-legged plant eater, quadrupedal herbivore.
Standard sauropod setup then. Big body, long neck.
Generally, yes. But here's a key thing. Size. Compared to the real giants, like Brachiosaurus or Argentinosaurus, Abrosaurus was actually, well, relatively small.
Small for a sauropod. How small are we talking?
Estimates put it around maybe 30 feet long. That's about 9.1 meters.
Okay, 30 feet. Still a big animal, obviously, but yeah, not the absolute behemoths we sometimes picture.
Exactly, a sort of mid-sized player in that world.
So if it wasn't tiny, what was the delicate part? You mentioned the name?
Yes, the name comes down to the skull. That's the key. It had a pretty distinctive head, kind of boxy.
Boxy head, okay.
And it had a tall, bony arch on top where the nostrils were located. But the delicate part, that refers to the skull's construction.
How so?
It had really large openings in the skull fenestrae, they're called. And the bits of bone separating these openings, these bony struts, were remarkably thin.
Ah, I see. So lots of holes and thin connections making it look less solid.
Precisely. It gave the skull a much lighter, more, well, delicate appearance compared to the thicker, more robust skulls of some other sauropods.
And the name reflects that directly.
Yep. Abrosaurus literally comes from the Greek. Abros meaning delicate or dainty, and sauros, of course, meaning lizard.
Delicate lizard. Makes perfect sense now, focusing on the skull.
And it does make you wonder, did that later skull structure maybe affect how it ate? What kind of plants it focused on? Interesting questions there.
So definitely food for thought. Now, you hinted earlier that the naming process wasn't straightforward. There was a bit of a story.
Oh, yeah. It's a great little example of how scientific naming conventions work and sometimes need correcting. It first popped up in a PhD thesis back in 1986 by the paleontologist Yang Hui. And in the thesis, the proposed name was Abrosaurus gigantorhinus.
Gigantorhinus. Big nose.
Something like that, likely referring to that nasal arch. But here's the snag. A PhD thesis doesn't automatically count as a formal publication under the rules.
What rules are those?
The International Code of Zoological Nomenclature, the ICZN. It sets the standards for how species get named. You need a proper description. It needs to be published in a certain way, accessible to other scientists.
And the thesis didn't meet those standards.
Apparently not sufficiently. So that first name, Abrosaurus gigantorhinus, is considered what's called a nomen nudum.
A nomen nudum?
Yeah, literally means a naked name. It was proposed, but it lacks the formal description and publication needed to be valid. Funnily enough, that invalid name actually got used in at least one published paper later on, which shows how confusion can spread.
Huh. So how to get its proper official name then?
Well, Ouyang followed up with a formal publication in 1989, and in that paper, he named the species Abrosaurus dongpoensis.
Dongpoensis. That sounds like it refers to a place. The -sis suffix usually means from, right?
Typically, yes. But Ouyang's intention was actually to honor a person. A famous Chinese poet from the 11th century, Su Shi, who also went by the name Su Dongpo.
Ah, Su Dongpo. And he was from Sichuan, where the dinosaur is found.
Exactly. So the intent was personal honor, not geographical location. The scientific community later recognized this wasn't quite the right suffix for honoring a person.
So they fixed it.
They did. The species name was revised to Abrosaurus dongpoi. The I suffix is the standard Latin ending used when naming a species after a male individual.
Dongpoi honoring Su Dongpo.
Got it. So after that little detour, Abrosaurus dongpoi became and remains the accepted scientific name. It really shows that naming is a process, sometimes with corrections along the way.
It's fascinating how precise that system aims to be. Okay, so we have the name sorted, and we know the skull was the delicate part. What actual fossils do we have? What's the evidence?
The main piece of evidence, the absolute cornerstone, is the holotype specimen.
The original example used for the description.
That's right. It's cataloged as ZDM 5038. And it's a fantastic find, a nearly complete skull, and it's incredibly well preserved.
Wow, a complete skull is amazing for a sauropod.
It really is. It gives us a great look at that unique head structure. Now, beyond that holotype skull, there are mentions in scientific papers of other fossils potentially belonging to Abrosaurus.
What?
Things like another more incomplete skull and even parts of a skeleton.
Okay, so maybe we know something about the body too.
Well, here's the catch. While those other fossils have been mentioned or referred to Abrosaurus, there haven't been any detailed, peer-reviewed scientific descriptions published for them yet.
Ah, so someone might have found them and thought, this looks like Abrosaurus, but hasn't published the full analysis.
Pretty much. It means our really solid, scientifically documented knowledge is heavily based on that excellent holotype skull. The rest of the body. The picture is still a bit fuzzy in the official literature.
Right. We've got a great portrait of the head, but the full body picture is less clear, scientifically speaking.
Exactly, and that lack of published detail on the postcranial skeleton, everything behind the skull, makes it harder to be absolutely certain about its exact proportions, how it moved, things like that.
That makes total sense. So with that caveat about the skeleton, where does Abrosaurus fit in the bigger picture? The dinosaur family tree. You said Macronaria earlier.
Yes, Macronaria. So when it was first described, primarily based on that skull, Ouyang classified it as a commersaurid.
Like Camarasaurus, the North American sauropod.
Exactly. Similar skull features, probably. But, our understanding of sauropod relationships evolves as we find more fossils and do more analysis.
So the thinking has changed.
Somewhat. The current view generally places Abrosaurus as a more basal member of Macronaria.
Basal meaning, like an earlier offshoot, closer to the base of that group's branch.
That's a good way to put it. Sort of an early cousin to Camarasaurus and the other macronarians that evolved later. But again, because we don't have those detailed descriptions of the rest of the skeleton published.
Its exact spot is still a bit uncertain.
Precisely. Its precise placement within Macronaria is still considered somewhat provisional. More data, especially from that potential skeletal material, could really help nail down its relationships. It's an active area of study.
Like finding the exact twig on a big branch of the tree. Okay, just to give everyone listening a clear sense of its position, could you run through the formal scientific classification from the big picture down to the species?
Sure, so starting broad, domain Eukaryota, kingdom Animalia, phylum Chordata, then within Chordata, the clade Dinosauria.
Dinosaurs, okay.
Within dinosaurs, it's Insurischia, the group that includes sauropods and theropods.
Right, lizard hip.
Then Sauropodomorpha, which is the broader long-necked group, leading to Sauropoda itself, the giants.
Got it.
Within Sauropoda, we place it in the clade Macronaria. And finally, that brings us to the genus Abrosaurus, and the type species, the only recognized species, is Abrosaurus dongpoi.
Perfect. That lays it all out clearly. So wrapping up our deep dive on this delicate lizard, What are the main things you think listeners should take away about Abrosaurus?
Okay, key takeaways for you. First, Abrosaurus was this intriguing, relatively small sauropod living in China during the Middle Jurassic.
Small for a sauropod, but still big.
Ha, yes, context is everything. Second, its name, delicate lizard, isn't random. It specifically points to that unique skull structure with the thin bones and large openings.
The skull is the star.
Definitely. Third, remember that naming story. It's a neat little window into how scientific classification works, including the need for proper publication and occasional correction.
The nomen nudum and the suffix change.
Right. And finally, while that amazing holotype skull tells us a lot, we still need more published research on any other potential fossils to get a truly complete picture of Abrosaurus and lock down its exact spot in the sauropod family.
So, a known entity in many ways, but still some mysteries remain.
That's paleontology for you. Always more to learn.
Which leads perfectly into a final thought for you to consider. Given that our detailed knowledge, especially beyond that fantastic skull, is still limited by what's been formally published, what else might have been unique or surprising about Abrosaurus? Could its skeleton have held other delicate features? Or maybe something completely unexpected? And what might future finds in that incredibly rich Deshampu quarry reveal about this particular dinosaur and its role in that ancient Chinese ecosystem?
It really highlights the potential, doesn't it? What secrets are still waiting in those rocks?
Exactly. Something to ponder about the ongoing discovery of Earth's prehistoric past.